A reminder that Unfound is on Facebook, TikTok, the X, and Instagram. John Clinton Walker, Clint to his family, was a 48-year-old from Bellingham, Washington. He was an easygoing guy who loved the outdoors. On November 11th, 2014, videos showed Clint getting on a bus near his home, then getting off at a place where Clint usually hiked. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. The role that clothes can play in investigating disappearances is varied. Sometimes they tell you everything you need to know. Other times, the discovery of a shirt, pants, shoes can lead to more questions than answers. Unfound's own cases are surely proof of the wide range of conclusions that can be drawn from coming across missing people's attire, whether the items were being worn at the time of the disappearance or not. Some examples. Helen Diamond's coat was found in the woods far from where she was last seen, with some people believing it was staged there. One of Mark Heimbaugh's shoes was found at the water's edge, not far from his home after he disappeared. And yes, as with Helen's jacket, many people believe Mark did not leave his shoe there. And more recently on Unfound, Elaine Johnson left a large portion of her clothes in a washer and dryer at her apartment complex when she went missing. You, the public, are quite sure that was not staged, though. Meaning, there's no real consensus on what clothes mean when left behind, whether out in the wild or in a closet. Every situation must be judged on its own. Well, with Clint Walker, we are all going to be challenged on this topic. Whatever happened to him, why was there no jacket required? And now a summary of the case. Clint Walker, throughout his life, spent most of his time in either Texas or Washington. In fact, he met his wife in the Lone Star State, but they eventually settled in the Evergreen one. Yet their marriage faltered. However, this did not ruin their friendship. In fact, Clint ended up living at his ex-wife's mother's house for a while. There were no custody issues regarding their daughter, and Clint was always invited to all family events. This was probably due to Clint's easygoing nature and his desire to be friendly with everyone. And the biggest issue going on with Clint at the time of his disappearance was him being unemployed for longer than he would have liked. So, on November 11th, 2014, in the afternoon, Clint was due to take a trip to an event involving one of his grandchildren. However, his plan first was to get in his morning daily hike near Mount Baker, Washington. As video later showed, Clint got on the bus near where he lived, then exited near the trail. Nothing was amiss. However, family knew something wasn't right when Clint did not appear at the event later that day. He was never seen again. Curiously and seemingly contradictory, no video showed Clint getting back on the bus to take the trip back to his home from Mount Baker. Yet, the jacket he was wearing in the bus video was found back at his home, with no firm explanation as to how it got there. We all probably have more clothes than we will ever wear. Not to mention us all keeping clothes that will never fit us again. Contemplate how wardrobes and the forensics that can be gotten from them can be better used to solve disappearances, while you also try to answer these 3 questions during the interview. Number 1, would Clint really have taken all of his usual stuff with him if he planned to commit suicide that day due to some depression he claimed to have? Number 2, how much do Clint's dental problems play into your understanding of his disappearance, if at all? And number 3, is the explanation for the jacket simply that Clint came home and left again without the jacket, and his movements were somehow missed by the bus video? Clint's family is not sure what to think about his disappearance. The guest for this episode is Clint's daughter, Tabitha. Unfound news. It's about that time for another appearance on Dr. Telesco's show. This will happen this Thursday, Halloween, at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Fischler College of Education and School of Criminal Justice channel. And yes, I have a wee bit of a costume planned. Next, although this appearance will not be open to the public, I'll be doing a Zoom presentation to a journalism class at Texas A&M University on November 4th. The topics will be podcasting, 21st century media, and ethics in reporting, and true crime in particular. Finally, we're near the end of the month. Please be looking for another Unfound Now on the YouTube channel. While all Patreon and YouTube supporters should keep their eyes peeled for the next Found episode. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the daughter of John Clinton Walker, Tabitha. Tabitha, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, and I do think we've done like 350 disappearances now. I think you are the first Tabitha on so congratulations on that.
I'm not surprised by that. It's a very unusual name.
I have to ask, were you named after Bewitched, or does that name come from something else?
You know, if only I had those powers, that would be wonderful.
That would be fantastic, yes. Okay. All right. So maybe not then. A family name or something?
No, just something my mom came up with.
Okay, very good. All right, we'll just leave it at that. Now, for purposes of our interview today, the way I understand it is, even though his full name is John Clinton Walker, people knew him by Clint?
Correct.
All right, so we will refer to him, if everybody gets confused by that, we're going to refer to him as Clint during the course of this interview and for the entire episode itself. So let's just start here. Tabitha, tell the listeners a little bit about your family. Maybe you want to talk about maybe if you have any other siblings, maybe talk about the Walker home growing up just a little bit, and then of course we'll get into your father specifically.
Of course. So I grew up in a mixed home. So my mother and my father split when I was little. I grew up with them split. You know, I think I was maybe 1 when they got divorced. But my dad, he was always a part of the family, regardless of that. I did grow up. My mom did remarry, had 4 elder siblings, and then I ended up having 2 younger sisters. So I grew up in this big family, crazy household. You know, there were 7 of us kids, and on the opposite side, I was an only child for my dad. He never remarried, never had any children. So it was quite, you know, one extreme to the next.
Yeah. Right.
So, but he was there. I mean, he was a huge part of my life, and he kind of bounced back from, you know, his family's from Texas, and so between Texas and Washington, he kind of came back and forth. It was pretty consistent. I never necessarily lived with him full time, but
Mm-hmm.
He was a consistent part of my childhood.
Okay. So when your parents split up, there was no official like custody arrangement or anything then?
You know, not that I'm aware of. It was
Okay.
always, so my dad was always just a part of the family. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he actually lived with my grandmother, my mom's mom,
Huh.
for a long time, and still my aunt and uncle, my mother's siblings, considered him as a brother, and we were
Yeah.
all very close,
Wow.
regardless of the divorce and everything. He was at family functions. He
Wow,
was,
that's good. I mean,
yeah.
I realize the divorce I mean, some divorces can be good, but given that you know how acrimonious so many of them can be, that he was still welcome in your mother's home and everything. That sends tells me a lot about all the people involved.
Oh, absolutely. It was there. There was no um, bad feelings or tension, or
Hmm.
it was just he was always around, even after my mom had remarried and
Mm-hmm.
her children. He was always still there.
Okay.
So,
Okay. And you said what part of the state of not Washington D.C. but the state of Washington? What part of Washington are we talking about?
I was born and raised in Southwest Washington, so near the Oregon border,
Mm.
about 45 minutes an hour from Portland,
Okay.
in Longview, Kelso. Um, which is where I was born. I grew up. I do believe that my mother and father met in Texas, which is where actually both my mother's family and my father's family are from.
Okay.
Somehow got to Washington. That's where I was born. That's where I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
But I spent my whole childhood in Longview, Kelso.
Okay. Very good. Let's move on to this. Of course, we talked about that's why we're here. We're talking about your father and his disappearance. You've already mentioned a little bit about him and how even after you and or he and your mother got divorced, he was still welcome to come around. They worked things out their own. Maybe it doesn't sound like there was any official custody, like through a judge or anything. Everybody got along really well even after this divorce. So why don't you just talk about your dad? What do you remember about his personality? What was he into? Work, of course, we're going to get maybe into how he was unemployed at the time, but what kind of work did he do before that? What was he into? What was he like as a guy?
Oh, my dad. So he was kind of a recluse. I mean, like I said, he never remarried after.
Mm-hmm.
Um, had a couple girlfriends here and there, but he was more of, I was his center. I was his focus. He had jobs here and there. He did move back and forth from Washington to Texas. I know he went to Texas a couple of times in my childhood to help his uncle with his real estate business, and even during that time I would go out during the summers and spend my summers in Houston. But he loved ancestry, and this is one of my longest standing memories. Is he loved to look. I remember spending hours at the library with him, and he would just be looking up our ancestry. He had just binders and books full of, dating all the way back. He loved that kind of stuff. He loved history. And then as I got a little older, it was his love for alternative rock music, Pearl Jam,
Right. I remember
Red
us talking
Chili
about this.
Peppers,
Yeah.
Smashing Pumpkins, all of that. Jimi Hendrix was his absolute favorite. I listened to a lot of Jimi Hendrix growing up.
Okay.
But mostly, he loved hiking. He had this obsession with Bigfoot, and anybody who knew my dad knew he loved just going out and looking for Bigfoot or anything that had to do with Bigfoot.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it Good
Well,
thing
it's the state of Washington. Isn't Washington one of those states where some of these, I mean, if you believe in that type of thing, those sightings have happened in the state of Washington?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
That's it. Yeah. But hiking was just his thing. I mean, I don't ever remember a time where he wasn't hiking. I mean, he thought he'd be gone for hours or half a day. I mean, that was just his thing. And no matter where he was at, he lived down in Southwest Washington for a while. He lived up in the north part of Washington, and he always had his hiking spots. That was his thing. And he walked everywhere, even if he had a vehicle. If he could walk, he would walk. So.
Did you ever go as I don't know, as a 15-year-old? Did you ever go hiking with him? What would you say his tendencies were with the hiking?
I wasn't really big on that, especially as a teenager. I'd much rather hang out with my friends at that point in my life. So
right, of course.
I specifically recall, and I do kind of believe that was kind of his time. I don't really think it ever came down to like, hey, you want to come hiking with me? Or, I think that was just his solace.
Okay.
Was to just be in the woods.
Right.
So, I mean, I did, went on walks with him and so forth and such, but I specifically remember he lived in downtown Houston, and I believe I was in my teenage years, 14, 15, and I do remember strolling the downtown streets of Houston with him, just walking around. So he loved walking, loved hiking, he loved the woods.
Did he, when you say hiking, did he ever do any like overnight trips? I mean, I guess we might call that thing camping, but he do camping or just like kind of day walking paths trips?
Strictly day walk. I mean, he wasn't the like put up a tent and live off the land kind of guy.
Gotcha.
At all. I don't even know if he went camping in his life, to be perfectly honest.
Okay.
But he knew his way around the raw woods, the woodlands more than anybody I had ever met. And it was just a day thing, and not ever usually after dark.
Okay.
Like I said, I just his solace.
Okay. What about any friends? We're going to get into his living situation here in a moment and the connection that he had with the guy that was also on the property. But what about other friends? He said he was a little bit of a recluse, so not many friends, no hanging out with guy friends.
He had a very, very small circle. Okay. And that circle mostly consisted of me, his grandkids, family, and maybe a couple of friends here and there, but nobody consistently. Okay. And then obviously his roommate, which was the only person I believe outside of his family that was consistent in those last parts before he went missing.
Okay. Let's move up to this, his living situation. How long, the way you remember it, how long did he live in the city where he was living at the time of his disappearance? How did he come upon that particular place? How did he know his neighbor or the landowner, whoever this guy was? Let's just talk about what you understood about his living situation at the time of his disappearance.
Right. So I know that he was previously living with a girlfriend on a reservation up there in that Bellingham area, and they had split. And I believe my timeline could be off a little bit from recollection and just things that I've gathered and letters that I have from him. I believe he moved out of that house somewhere around 2010. And he was working with the Sargento company, and this roommate of his daughter worked there. And I don't know if they met at a work function, which I know they did a lot, because I had actually went to a couple of his work functions. But somehow, through his daughter and then working together, he met his roommate, who happened to have, this kind of vacated basement area that he was willing to rent to my dad. So I do believe, from my recollection, that is how, him and his roommate kind of met and ended up under the same roof.
Okay. Now, and so you're just, once again, we're just doing the best we can here. We understand this disappearance is almost 10 years old. So your best guess is he was living at his last location for about 4 years then? About, okay.
Give or take, yeah.
Okay, and were they, this other guy, and we'll get into him more specifically later, but were they living like in the same building, or were there two separate buildings on this property? What was the situation? I mean, were you over there to see it once in a while, or what?
So I did see it a couple of times. So this area, it was kind of like near the foothills of Mount Baker. So you had to climb like 1,000 handmade wooden steps just to even get to I had to put my car or my truck at the time, my SUV, into 4-wheel drive just to get into the back side of the driveway.
Wow.
So it was literally a house built on the side of a mountain.
Okay.
And so walking up to it, there was what used to be kind of a basement at the bottom, and then there were stairs that went up into the living space, and I do believe there was like a open attic area. And I call it a basement, but I don't believe that there was only one way in and out of the part where my dad had been, living.
Okay.
And that was through just kind of a side door that opened up into the bottom steps of the main house. Although it was all still connected. Like I said, it was like on the side of a hill, built really funky, just not your average type home.
Okay. But they were living in the same building.
It was the same structure. Yes.
Same structure, okay. And your father had like the basement, and the other guy had the rest of the place.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and he was there for about 4 years, and he seemingly knew this guy through the guy's daughter, and your father had worked with this daughter at one time.
Correct.
Okay. And we'll get into this deeper later, but in general, as best as you can tell, how was that living situation going? As best as you can tell.
Well, I mean, it wasn't ideal, to say the least. I mean, he didn't have a working bathroom. I mean, there was no, other than electricity and a phone line, there was no other functioning utilities. So he didn't have a full kitchen. He didn't have a full bathroom. Wow. It was basically this concrete space that he made his little studio.
Okay.
And his roommate was a drunk. And, my dad just he was a man of little patience, especially the behavior.
All right. Let's just keep this simple. Would you say that as best as you can tell, once again, your opinion, your observation, did your father and this guy share a lot in common? Similar types of people or different?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, I only met the roommate a handful of times.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't say so.
Not
at
similar.
all. It's not like they, hung out or went out on the weekends or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just the right opportunity at the right time, and we ended up living under the same roof.
Okay. What about heat? It sounds to me then that like the other guy had control of like the heat functions then too. For example, your father didn't have any control over like the air temperature and everything. It was in part of another part of the house.
Right. And so I don't even believe there were windows in this kind of. It wasn't meant to be a living space.
Okay.
There was one door. It was just a concrete square that, my dad had a bed in this corner and a desk in this corner and a little makeshift closet kind of thing. He did have a couple of space heaters in there. As anyone might know, if they're from Washington, you don't necessarily need air conditioning. So
right. Okay.
That was really an issue.
Okay. All right, we'll leave it at that. We're going to come back to that a little bit later when we come back to this guy and things. Let's move on to this. Now, my understanding, though, is your father, even though he was working and met this daughter of the roommate at one point, your father was, I guess, unemployed at this time. Why is that?
Correct, yes. So he had been working for the company Sargento, who had kind of a platform in Bellingham. And in the spring of 2012, that company decided to close down that facility, specifically in Bellingham. And they had given all the employees two options. They basically said, hey, we're shutting this warehouse down. Either we can relocate you, pay for all your relocation, and start you fresh at our other facility in Wisconsin, or we can give you a severance. We can do a severance pay.
Yeah.
And I don't even think it was a second thought in my dad's head. He wasn't going to leave me and his grandkids.
Right.
That was just, he wasn't going to leave. So, and I didn't necessarily have the option of leaving at the time. My husband was in the military and stationed there. So he decided, he opted to take the severance.
Okay. And never got another job after that?
He did not. He struggled for a long time to find work after that.
Yeah. How long did that, once again, remind everybody, how long did that happen before he went missing? A couple years, did you say? 2 years?
It was at least, so I believe he stopped working somewhere at the end of 2012, possibly the beginning of 2013.
Okay.
It's kind of a rough timeline of when they officially closed the facility.
Okay. Then what was he doing if he was having problems finding work and everything? And it sounds like he lives out here in the middle of nowhere, so that's not going to be very convenient. What was he doing for money?
He was living off of that severance for a while.
He was, okay.
I do believe it was a pretty generous severance pay. He was taking, doing these extravagant things with me and the kids and taking us to, theme parks and doing all of these things. So I do think that the severance that was given to him was enough to tide him over for whatever amount of time.
Okay. Okay, but do you think that the severance had run out by the time that he went missing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All
Yes.
right. All right, so he's unemployed, and when do you think was the last time that he had a job before he went missing? Any sort of. I realize you had your own life to lead as best as you can tell.
So he never got another job after that facility shut down.
Okay, very good.
I think for a small portion of it, he was living off of the severance, enjoying not working and not actively looking for a job for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
But then, once that was running out,
Right.
he was not able to find work.
Okay. All right, let's move on to this. Now, don't know how much we need to spend time on this, but we did talk about it. Your best observation of your father Clint in 2014. Would you, because once again, we've described it so far. This living situation, money situation, job situation. Would you say that it was depressed? Did he ever, get any? If he was, did he get any help regarding that? What was his, his emotional, mental status? Would you say during the course of 2014?
So, 2014 was a very odd year for me. I actually didn't spend a lot of time with him during 2014.
Okay.
My husband was deployed. I was pregnant with our youngest son.
Wow.
I moved 4 hours away to be with my family back in Longview, Kelso at the time. And so I frequently talked to him on the phone. He had come down and visit a couple times. But I wasn't as active in his life in 2014 just because I was so far away. And I had a lot going on.
Yeah, of course. Sounds like it.
Yeah, so
Okay.
We talked regularly and nothing seemed out of sorts.
Okay. What about, you said that, it sounds like your mother and he had a decent relationship after the two got divorced. Was anybody else in your family talking to him besides you during that year?
So I do believe my grandmother, so my mom's mom,
Okay.
did keep in pretty good contact with him throughout my entire life. I don't know specifics or like if they talk certain days of the week or anything like that, but I know that they kept in contact. I also know that he did speak with his mother and his sister often, which were the two only other people really, that he connected with outside of my side of my mom's side of the family.
Okay. But would you say he was depressed? Did he ever talk about being down? Have you ever heard of him talking to anybody else about being down? Anything like that?
Not really. I mean, he had a history of being depressed, and it wasn't until, we have a family history of depression, just across the board. But it wasn't until my adulthood that he had talked to me specifically about a situation where he was diagnosed with depression. He was put on antidepressant medications. And he, on his own, decided to stop taking them cold turkey and kind of went into this mental frenzy where he thought that people were speaking other languages, and I don't know if it was some type of psychosis or what, but he did admit himself into the hospital, and it just kind of chalked up to he didn't wean himself properly off of those medication, There was never any other incident that I'm aware of. I wasn't even aware of this incident until, I was an adult and dealing with my own depression and talking with him about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but during this time, I don't recall him obviously verbalizing to me that he was feeling down or depressed.
Okay. Let's move on to this. Now, this area that seemingly he went hiking to the day that he disappeared, and we're going to get into maybe another possibility maybe before the end of this interview, but this place that seemingly he went to hike the day of his disappearance, familiar with this? This area, not familiar with this area? What is your understanding?
He was very familiar with this area. I had been there a couple of times, and this area is called Deming, Washington, which was, I would say, east of his place of residence, closer to Mount Baker. He had taken me down there for some kind of racing event. He often went there, though. Just, I knew this in a conversation, and he would talk about his hiking in that area. And it wasn't a secluded area by any means. There were houses, there were people, there was a creek, it was kind of a prime place to go hiking around. And so it wasn't unusual for him to go out there.
Okay. Any idea how many times a week he would go there? Best guess.
Probably every morning.
Wow, okay. All right.
He was an early riser, and he, that's the first thing he wanted to do when he,
okay.
Of course, being unemployed and having the ability to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a part of his life. It was a part of his routine. So I don't know specifically if he got up every morning and went, but it was very often.
Okay, so he must have been a fit guy then, going this hiking every morning. He must be in pretty good shape for his age.
He wasn't in bad shape. I mean,
Yeah, if you're going to go hiking every morning, get up and do that, then you can't help but be in decent shape.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Other than his diet was questionable, but I mean, the amount of walking and hiking and cardio that he did on a daily and weekly basis, he didn't have any major health conditions, heart disease, things like that.
Okay. Let's move on to this. One more thing, just about your father here. Planning on a trip to go see you. How long was this plan? What was this about? Maybe you won't have to get maybe the specifics, but how long had this been planned, and what was your idea of how he was going to go see you and your children? What is this story?
So this was. I'm just gonna backtrack a little bit here.
Go ahead.
Because I had just given birth to his youngest grandson in August of 2014, and my husband had just returned from deployment in October, and so we had ended up getting a house there in Oak Harbor, Whidbey Island, which was approximately an hour, a little bit more than an hour away from where my dad was living at the time. So we had just moved from, Southwest Longview, Kelso, Southwest Washington, 4 hours, from him, to just basically being an hour away. And so he was so excited because, I had just had a baby. He was, just a couple months old.
Yeah.
and he was just ecstatic that we were going to be so close that he could come and visit.
Yeah.
And he ended up helping us move that October, which was the last time I saw him. It was about mid to late October, I believe, is when he came down. He drove the U-Haul for us, helped us move everything, stayed for the weekend, spent time with his grandbabies. So my son ended up having this Veterans Day program scheduled on November 11th of 2014, and I had called my dad a couple of weeks prior and just told him, like, hey, he's having this program. If you want to come up, or come down, rather, spend the week with us. I was exhausted. I had 3 young kiddos at home. I had just given birth to a baby. My husband's in the military, so I was kind of thankful that, he could come down and maybe help me out a little bit, spend the week. And of course, he was ecstatic about it.
Yeah.
And we had talked specifics. And I think at this point, he was running low on funds. He did not want to drive his car and spend money on the gas. Mm-hmm. So he had this plan to park his car at the bottom of the hill where he lived, walk to the bus station. All of our bus fees, or the buses on the island that we lived on were free. So he didn't have to pay for those. Yeah, so he's like, I'll just ride, the bus from Bellingham onto the island, and then, ride the bus from the island to your place. So we had a specific meeting spot. It was right at the corner of our neighborhood, right in front of the elementary school where this Veterans Day program was going to take place. I think we had talked again earlier, that weekend, right before, a couple days before the program, when he was supposed to travel to our place, and he gave me, what time it was supposed to stop there, and that we'd meet there, and all the specifics.
Okay. All right. So you believe he was going to ride the bus. He would take how many buses are we talking about? 2 different buses, like ride one bus to one spot and then get on another bus to go to where you were going to meet him. 2 bus, like one change of buses, or what?
No, I do believe there would have been probably 3, possibly 4 bus changes.
Wow. Okay.
And this wasn't abnormal for him at all. I mean, he kept a paper copy of the bus schedules. He rode buses and walked everywhere as much as he could. He did not like to drive. He would much rather walk. He'd much rather take public transportation. That's just who he was.
Okay.
So it was like he had almost had the bus schedules memorized.
And I'm guessing the bus drivers knew him.
They as a matter of fact, they did. And during our searching, they did recognize him.
Okay. So let me ask you this. So so we're clear on this, this particular trip that he was supposed to take to see you, had he taken that specific trip before with those same buses, or was this going to be the first time doing it this way?
So he had not taken those specific buses to see me, but he had taken the bus route from my place back to his. Okay. Because he had helped us move from Southwest Washington. I had picked him up, all of the specifics, but he had basically rode the bus from that same bus stop that he had planned on meeting us at on November 11th of 2014, and had taken that whole route back to his house.
Okay. All right. So kind of the reverse trip. He'd done the reverse trip.
He'd done the reverse trip,
okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. And what, just to make sure, what day was this that he was supposed to arrive at your place for this event?
That would have been Tuesday, November 11th of 2014.
Okay.
Which was Veterans Day.
Okay.
And he had planned on getting off the bus somewhere around, rough estimate, about 5:30 p.m. And because we were within walking distance of the elementary, we were just going to meet him at the bus and go straight to the elementary school for the program.
Okay. All right, we will come back to that in a moment. Just some general questions. Any concern about your father during 2014? Did he tell you about any physical issues, heart issues, cancer issues? Did he talk about having any problems with anybody? Any of that going on in 2014, or even very close, of course, to the time of his disappearance?
So the only thing that my dad had was chronic back pain, which sounds crazy considering he hiked almost on a daily basis. But he had a fall back in 2005, 2006, had major back surgery, did suffer from chronic back pain. But he managed that with medical marijuana, and he still went and, did all his hiking, and that was fairly unchanged throughout all of those years. The only thing that I really recall is when he had stayed with us when we moved in October of 2014. He was dealing with a lot of dental issues. He was having dental, teeth pain.
Yeah.
He was dealing with abscesses.
Yeah.
He was very upset because he couldn't eat popcorn, which was his number one favorite meal ever.
Yeah.
And so I know he was having a lot of pain and stuff, and he was on antibiotics at the time. Just dealing with a lot of dental stuff.
Ouch.
Outside of that, I don't really recall anything out of the ordinary.
Okay.
He didn't, and then he didn't really seem to, like I said, he kept his circle close. He'd had tiffs with his roommate, and that was an ongoing thing. It was nothing new, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that set off red flags or, roommates have some arguments and have some tiffs here.
Sure.
And so, and I heard about, he talked to me about those, and nothing seemed abnormal or out of the ordinary during that time.
Okay. Yeah, just speaking of teeth issues, they can creep up on people and they can be dangerous. Toothaches, things like that. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay. So I guess the way I understand it then is when he didn't show up on November 11th here at the 5:30 in that evening, then you, I guess, were the first person to realize maybe something wasn't right?
Correct, yes. And I'm going to backtrack a little bit on that as well. I apologize.
Go ahead.
I had actually called that morning.
November 11th. That was Tuesday. That was Veterans Day of 2014.
Correct.
Okay.
Veterans Day 2014. That morning, I had called my dad numerous times. His cell phone was not working at that time. He had a landline. I had called him multiple times, and it just went to voicemail. So finally, I decided to call his roommate. And he answered, and he told me, I said, hey, I'm looking for my dad. I can't get a hold of him. Have you seen him? And he told me that he's seen him early morning the day prior, leaving the house, and that he thought he was on his way to come stay with us.
Okay.
In our car. And I was like, well, he's not here. He was supposed to be, coming today. I just wanted to make sure plans were still the same, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I tried calling him a couple of times later on during the day and nothing. And I think it hit me around the afternoon hours that something wasn't right.
Okay. And so when he didn't show up on the bus at 5:30, then that kind of just maybe solidified what you were already feeling.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I don't even know how I got through my son's Veterans Day program. I don't remember a lick of it because I was just so anxious and thinking all the things. So as soon as we got back home from that program, I immediately, I called, I believe, my mom and a couple other people, and was like, maybe I should file a missing persons report. So I called the police department, and as a lot of you know, they have to be missing. A person has to be missing for an X amount of time before anything can be officially filed. So it was a really long night, a restless one.
Right.
Still no answer from him. Nothing.
Okay. Let me just jump in, Tabitha, to ask you a couple questions. When was the last time you spoke to your father before you went missing? We know that you tried to call him on the morning of November 11th, but when was the last time you actually did speak to him?
I spoke with him that previous weekend.
Okay.
Which is when we had specified, he had specified his plan to me. I'm going to catch this bus to go here, and then this bus, and then I'll meet you here. Kind of like he had already went through the whole bus schedule and said, this is what my plan is.
Okay.
I spoke to him that weekend. He had a plan. He was excited.
Yeah.
And so that was the last time I spoke to him on the phone.
Okay. Now, and just to be clear about something else regarding the roommate, when you finally did reach the roommate said he last saw him not on the morning of November 11th, but on the morning of November 10th.
He did, correct.
Okay.
Later on, days later, I'm talking probably the 17th, 18th.
Okay.
Even after that whole week is kind of jumbled in my brain.
Yeah.
He did make an observation that, well, it may have been that morning.
Oh, okay.
But he wasn't entirely sure.
Okay.
So that was just kind of.
Okay.
What was it?
Well, no, we'll come back to that a little later, but originally, when you called the roommate, you couldn't get a hold of your father on November 11th. Of course, this is before your father didn't show up. The roommate said, I think I saw him the morning before, not the morning of November 11th, but the morning of November 10th.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so the red flag that day, of course, is your father not showing up. Sounds like things got started as best they could. Yes, we know the police, there is no law in any state about 24 hours, 48 hours. That's just stuff that police make up because they don't want to do anything. They don't want to fill out any paperwork, as we've gone over and over and over the last 8 years. But when did something finally get started regarding your father's disappearance, something that was substantial?
That was the next day. I had called my ex-mother-in-law, who was still basically my mother-in-law. We were very close. And she immediately drove up and started taking charge on all of these things, talking to the police and filling out paperwork and contacting the media and making flyers and doing all of these things.
Okay.
She was wonderful. And I think, I don't even think I was so distraught during that time and just so confused and, postpartum, and that I kind of let her take the reins on a lot of those logistics of everything. But we did end up making a missing persons report that following day. And I also that while that was being done, me and my husband decided to travel up to his house,
right,
to kind of investigate ourselves, which is when we found his vehicle at the bottom of.
All right, we'll get into that, Tabitha. I just need to ask some questions. What were you thinking then at the time that he went missing on the day that he was going to see you? Is that what you were thinking? Even despite what the roommate said, what was your first initial reaction? Did he go missing on November 10th or November 11th?
I don't think that I really had any clue as to what could have happened. Timelines, I mean, everything was jumbled, and I was anxious, and anything was possible at that point.
Okay. All you know is you spoke to him that weekend before, so roughly the 8th or 9th. You spoke to him, and then after that, like you said, it was a little bit up in the air.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
I attempted my phone call to him that morning just to solidify everything, make sure he was okay, and as far as, his buses, and if he had the money to get on the buses, and just to make sure that, hey, we're still going to meet at this spot at this time, right?
Right.
And when everything came to light.
Okay. So the report then, it was filed on the 12th, November 12th, like the very next day after this event?
Correct.
The 12th. And this was filed by your ex-mother-in-law, is what you said.
I believe it was.
Okay.
Like I said, timeline, everything, that whole week is
right.
kind of jumbled, but I know she handled most everything when it dealt with any kind of the police and all of that in the beginning.
Okay. All right. I can understand your mind being jumbled, obviously. Was there anybody else maybe in your family that maybe had, what was maybe their initial reaction to all of this? He's supposed to come meet you. He didn't show up. He's obviously not at his home. We'll get to the roommate again a little later. Anybody have a knee-jerk initial reaction from somebody who knew him well? Any sort of ideas that were thrown out?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, my mother and my stepdad and a couple of my sisters ended up coming up that next night or the night after as well. Everybody just kind of collaborated together. Okay. And nobody really had, there was nothing. It was,
okay.
He was excited that I had moved back, or moved closer to him, and that he was going to be able to visit more and spend more time with his grandkids, and nothing really made sense.
Did you happen to find anybody who spoke to him after you spoke to him that previous weekend, or do you believe, as far as, except maybe for the roommate, are you the last person that he spoke to before he went missing?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay. All right, let's move on to what I call the rest of the case. We're not going to jump into some of these things a little bit more deeply and then add some more details to all of this. Let's just start here. What items are missing besides, of course, your father himself? What else is missing with him, as best as you can tell, almost 10 years later?
There are a few items. His backpack, which We have proof that he had on the last visual that we had on him. Mm-hmm. He had his normal black backpack that he travels everywhere with. He had his activated at the time, but he was still able to track time and such on it. That was missing. Mm-hmm. He had a dark gray beanie that he often wore during the cold months. That was missing. Mm-hmm. His keys missing.
Okay. So I guess we would say these are items that he normally would have on him if he was going on a trip to see you. Or maybe these are also items that would be with him if he was going hiking for the day. If he was going out, these are the items that he would usually take with him.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And we're going to get back to you how you went up there, and we're going to get to the car here in a moment and what you saw when you went up there and saw everything firsthand. But we just need to keep in mind that to this day, almost 10 years later, those are the items that are still missing. His backpack, his phone, these other items, his keys, normal stuff that people would carry with themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes.
All right. Let's talk about the phone a little bit. Any hopes, any attempts to get a hold of his phone records, ping information, anything like that? What do we know in the area of phone information?
Well, as you know, technology wasn't as fancy back, just 10 years ago mm-hmm. as it is today.
Okay.
It wasn't an active. It was a cell phone that I had actually bought him that wasn't active at the time. It was a flip phone.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't. It didn't have the capabilities of tracking and all these fancy apps that we have now.
Yeah.
And there was there was not really any way to track it.
Okay. So it wasn't a smartphone is what we're saying. We're talking a phone that's, maybe like something you'd find in like 2007 or something. 2005.
Oh, absolutely. It was not a smartphone. Okay. No, it was a simple black and orange flip phone that you could dial. I mean, it wasn't even anything that we text back where it was just strictly a mobile, phone that he could call me, or if he was out somewhere.
Okay.
I could call him, he could call me. It was for communication purposes only.
Okay. And so we don't have any records like that. We don't even have his phone records. Do you know if the police attempted to get them or anything like that?
I don't believe they did, no.
Okay.
And I think the reason for that is because it wasn't active. There was no SIM card. There was no active phone number.
Okay. How did he, without a SIM card and everything, how did he use it? How did it work then?
So he was still able to plug it in, and it still had the time. I do believe he had Wi-Fi at his house.
Oh, okay. So he would use the Wi-Fi to call you.
So he wouldn't call me from his phone. No, he had a lamp phone.
Okay.
I think he just put this phone on him just to tell the time, and that's it.
All right. Gotcha. All right, now we're a little clearer on that. Okay, so when you spoke to him on the phone, it was usually on an old-fashioned 1980s phone situation.
Oh yeah, it was that the fancy old bulky cordless phone that that we had on the wall as kids. Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm 54. I remember those days fondly. Okay. Moving on to this. As far as the search, the hiking area that he might have gone to the day before, and I'm bringing this up for everybody because, of course, there's a few different theories as to what could have happened to Clint, but we're also trying to narrow down, well, what day did it actually happen? And if we're just being open to the idea that maybe he went missing the day before on the 10th and not the 11th, was the area of where he usually went hiking, was that area searched?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that. How many people and, what was involved?
So we had an entire search party put together. Volunteer search and rescue. They had tents and tables. There was dozens of them. I had a bunch of family that had come up from Southwest Washington to help in searching on foot. I had done an interview with a local news station, or not news station, I'm sorry, a radio station that morning, and people had come out that listened to it, come out to help us search on foot. They had a helicopter going over the lake and anywhere that was visible to them, and we searched all day along the creeks, up and as far as we could get into the forest. They had four-wheelers, search and rescue team.
Wow. Was this very quickly? Was this like on the 13th or 14th, or did it take a little while to put this all together?
I think it took a little while to put it all together. I think that this happened on, I'm trying to think, so I went to, so probably the 6th, 15th, possibly.
Okay,
it
so
was the following Saturday, I believe.
Okay, so you got the word out, you and the rest of your family, your ex-mother-in-law, you all got the word out pretty fast, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had made flyers. We were posting everywhere. I was at the bus station with his face on a flyer. Hey, have you seen him? It was as quick as it could be, kind of searching.
Yeah. Just to remind everybody, what is this area? The name of this hiking area, these trails, whatever. What's the name of them? And how far are they from where your father lived?
So Deming was kind of the area that he hiked the most, and it's closer, foothills of Mount Baker. It's off of Mount Baker Highway. It was not a completely secluded area. There were houses here and there, but there was this beautiful creek that ran through, and I believe, I don't specifically remember this creek, but the name of it, but it ran through the foothills of Mount Baker. It was just a beautiful area, and a beautiful spot for hiking.
A lot of people, usually very busy, or what? I realize that maybe you're not an expert on the location, but your impression.
It was kind of a low-key area, I think. I think locals went hunting there and so forth, and did some fishing around the creek, and but it wasn't like this huge popular place that everybody went.
Okay. All right, so these searches done, nothing found, of course, nothing that could be connected to your father.
Correct.
All right. Now, before we go any further, before we get into you actually going up there and explaining what you saw, we'll get into where the car was and everything. You maybe need to explain to the listeners what he would do when he would ride the bus. He wouldn't walk, I guess, down from this location you've already described with all these steps and everything. he would drive his car down to the road and then walk, or what was the situation if he was going to ride the bus to where he went hiking? What did he usually do?
So his normal process was to drive down, kind of the mountainside. It was very steep. So he'd drive down to kind of the main road. It was called Britain Road, and there was a gravel pathway right at the foot of it. And he would park his car there, and then he'd walk down Britain Road at the corner of Mount Baker Highway, and he would ride at the bus stop, and he'd catch the bus there.
Okay, that's what he usually did.
Yes, that was normal for him, yes.
Okay, and so his car would just be parked there along the side of the road for everybody to see, like locked or whatever, and then when he came back, he'd just get in his car and drive back up the hill.
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's what he usually did. All right, now that we've gotten that out of the way, you did talk about how you and maybe your husband went up there, I guess, fairly quickly to check everything out. What was your experience about going up there? When did you do this, and what happened?
We did this, I believe it was the next day we went up, and we kind of went up in a rush. So I didn't grab my keys at that specific time. I did have a spare key to my dad's car that he gave me, and to his living space. I wasn't shocked to see the car at the foot of the hill.
Okay.
Because I knew that's what he did. The car was locked, and there was nothing really out of the ordinary in his living space that made me question anything necessarily.
Okay. Did you, when you got up there, did you open up the car? Did you look around in it? I have to ask, were you almost suspecting, maybe thinking you might find your father in it? What, did you automatically open it up, or did you leave that for the police? What did you do?
So I did open it. I retrieved the keys for it, and I did open it before anything else, before the police investigated or anything like that. And there was absolutely nothing in there except in his trunk there was a pair of boots in a box.
Okay.
Hiking boots in a box, which I thought odd.
Did they look new? Did they look really worn, like they'd been worn before? How did they look?
There was nothing there. It wasn't anything that I had ever seen before. My dad was he was not a materialistic guy. He would wear the same shoes till the soles fell out. So I had never seen these particular pair of boots before. They did not look super worn or old. They could have been previous work boots. I'm not sure. I had never seen them. And it was just a random kind of odd thing to be in his trunk.
Okay. Anything, all right, so these were in the trunk in a box. When you say box, like a shoe box?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Anything unusual about the car? Maybe not maybe something you noticed at the time, but maybe in retrospect, anything that now strikes you as odd that didn't at the beginning?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, so his car's just sitting there locked. Of course, we know his keys are missing, parked in its usual spot. As far as anybody could tell, that's where he would park it when he was catching the bus. What was done with the car eventually?
So eventually, it had sat for a couple of days. Well, let me backtrack there.
Okay.
Me and my husband had moved it from the bottom of the hill up to in front of their property because we didn't want it to get towed or anything being down there. So we had parked it right in where there's normal parking spot at the bottom of the steps of the house. And we didn't do anything with it initially. It was kind of just, it wasn't important at that time. After the whole investigation and everything happened, I did end up reaching out to a friend of my dad's who had been talking to me throughout this whole process and, asking questions and all of that. I just did ask them, hey, do you need an extra vehicle? We didn't need to take one. So I ended up gifting this vehicle to...
Excuse me? Where did it go?
I said I ended up gifting it to one of his previous co, just because they were in need of a second vehicle. So.
Okay. All right. And so the car, any forensics done in it, anything like that?
Nothing.
Okay. Now, your father, I understand, had a computer. Any help on that? Any searches done on it? I mean, anybody look at it to see if he was researching anything like that?
So his laptop was taken into custody of the police department. We had investigators who took it in, did what they had to do, and kind of basically just came back and said, well, there was nothing suspicious. You can come pick up the laptop.
Okay. All right. So it was the police who looked it over, not you, not somebody who would have known him well. It was somebody...
Right.
All right. And nothing of value found on it, seemingly. Okay.
No. We couldn't get into... I would have preferred to go through his laptop myself. Unfortunately, It had a passcode. I couldn't break that passcode. And the police, the investigators basically said, hey, we have this, we can get into it. But when they handed it back to us, it was locked. There was nothing we could have done.
All right, so you personally have never gotten to you never got to personally look over the laptop, what was on it?
No.
Okay. Now we're going to come up to, I think, two very, very important pieces of information regarding Clint's disappearance. Both of them raise quite a few bit of questions here. Let's first start with the video. You actually... Given that the belief is that he did get on the bus at least one of these days, you actually went and watched a bunch of bus video. Tell the listeners how that all happened, how much video you had to watch, and what did you see?
So I had been communicating with the bus station, asking them, hey, we have this, this missing person, can you look through your footage? They were coming back saying, oh, we looked through it, we don't see anything. And I think I just got impatient and possibly a little upset at this point that I actually went straight to the headquarters of the bus station and demanded that I see the video. And after a little finagling, they did take me back, and I was able to look through the video of specifically where I knew he got on and off the bus at the end of that road, and immediately I saw my dad walk onto the and I said, that's him right there.
Wow.
And they basically, we didn't recognize him because he had a beanie on in the video. I said, that's him right there. So thank goodness I did that. demanded that I see video.
Right.
So we watched.
Right, and you see him you see him get on the bus. Do you see him get off the bus?
We do. I saw him get off the bus at that normal stop in Deming, where he would. It's kind of just this abandoned gravel lot at the end of a residential road, and he got off there, and the last video captured was him walking toward, going down to the road before the bus pulled out.
All right, so I'm guessing then that this was video for November 10th, not November 11th.
This was video on November 11th.
It was.
It was, and he got onto the bus at 7:10 a.m. that morning.
Huh. And so he got on the bus though, but he didn't get on a bus that was headed to see you. He got on a bus that was headed to his hiking spot.
Correct, which I didn't find really abnormal. It
was okay.
Early in the. He wasn't meeting me until 5:30 p.m. that night. So he got up and did his normal hiking in the morning. Got on that 7:10 a.m. bus to his hiking spot. Did his hiking, and the hours of video footage that we watched for that same exact spot that he got off, we never saw him get back on that bus.
Okay.
To home.
So your understanding of November 11th was that he was just going to keep his regular routine, go hiking, and then what? Go home and then leave again to go see you.
That is my assumption of the events.
Okay. All right. So seemingly on November 11th, he was just following the same routine, but nobody ever sees him on video getting on that video. Or on the video, nobody sees him getting on the bus again. He gets off at this usual hiking spot. You don't see him get on the bus at that location. Again, I have to ask, did you watch any other video from any other maybe bus stops around there just to see if you might have caught a different one? I mean, that's hours and hours and hours of video, and I've done that sometimes. But, I mean, how much video did you watch?
We were at that bus station headquarters the entire day.
Wow.
And we watched a lot of video, and at no point, there wasn't a lot of stops. It's a pretty secluded area. It's way out towards the mountain. Mm-hmm. It's not like a usual, there's a bus stop every 2 blocks. There's a pretty big gap between bus stops out there. And at no point until we watched up until that last bus went to pick up at that spot. Mm-hmm. And there was my dad hadn't gone back to catch the bus back home.
Okay. Now I have to ask you a couple important questions. One that we've already discussed and one that we are going to discuss. First of all, those shoes/boots that you found in his car, are they the same ones that he is wearing in the video? Can you even tell?
Hi. So this was something that I have been thinking about. It wasn't super apparent or obvious to me at the time. There were things that were pointed out to me in the video. The shoes were not. The shoes he was wearing in the video were normal walking shoes.
Okay.
The shoes that we found in his trunk were like hiking boots, working boots. Mm-hmm. They were different than what he was wearing.
Okay.
In the video footage that we saw.
Okay, very good. So, best as you can tell, and by the way, you have the video, correct, Tabitha?
I do, yes.
And we've been kind of going through this. You were texting me yesterday, you having some issues getting it to play or the right format or something like that, right?
Yes, yeah, unfortunately. Technology is not my friend.
All right. Okay. Well, like I said, I gave you a couple ideas there or insights into that, and certainly I'm hoping you can get it working somehow. Certainly,
Yes.
but it's great that you
Yeah.
have it. Most families do not have any video of surveillance video from convenience stores, buses, wherever. You're very fortunate to have that. So
I'm very glad to have this. Yes, absolutely.
yeah, so as long as you have it, there's always hope that you can get it working again. I'm hoping somebody can figure that out for you. Of course, if you live close, I'd be more than happy to meet you and try to figure out for myself because I have a lot of experience in that area. But unfortunately, uh, as far as the contiguous United States, we could not be farther from each other, Florida and Washington. So
Yeah.
it's a little difficult. All right, so the
Yes.
boots, as far as you are satisfied that the boots that he's wearing in the video are not the boots or shoes that you found in his car in that box.
No.
Okay.
I think that they were different.
However, there is a shirt that he's wearing in the video that you believe you found, though, in his place when you went up there the next day. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So this had happened after the search and rescue. I think after the search and rescue, the investigators kind of were like, well, he's a middle-aged male. He doesn't have any kind of mental, incapacities.
Right.
Maybe he wanted to leave. They were kind of trying to do the shrug off the shoulder thing
Sure.
with me. And I just told them, I said, I want you to bring out the dogs. I mean, that was like my last hope, my last resort in this, because we had spent hours upon hours searching. And even outside of the search and rescue, me and my family were out there searching for days. And I pretty much demanded, just bring the dogs out.
Okay.
So they finally agreed, and they told me that I would need to go to his place and collect multiple items of clothing. I would have to be gloved up. I would have to pick it up with a trash bag or some kind of contraption. I wasn't able to touch anything because it would confuse the dogs. So when we went to his place, it was me and my husband and a couple other family members. I happened to notice that there was a flannel coat hanging on a hanger in his little makeshift closet, which I thought odd, just because, the last visual that I have of my father is in this flannel coat. And when I pulled it off the rack and turned it around, it was the same coat that he was wearing in the video that I saw of him getting on and off that bus the morning of November 11th. And this specifically, there was a large L-shaped cut in the back of it, where the fabric kind of just flapped around, and it was the exact same coat, the same cut.
Wow.
And that's when kind of the hair stood on the back of my neck.
I'm sure they did.
How is this even possible? I looked through all this video. I didn't see him get back on the bus or return back to, his house, or, it was blind.
All right, just so I can maybe spell this out for the listeners. You see him on the video November 11th. the day that we believe that he disappeared. And he's wearing these shoes, but he's wearing this flannel shirt that has a specific, unique rip in it.
Correct. Yes.
And to remind everybody, you saw him get on the bus by his car. You saw him get off the bus where he went hiking, but you never saw him get back on the bus. But when you went over to his place, maybe the next day, the day after, you actually found that flannel shirt with that very specific, unique tear in it hanging at his place.
I did. Yes. And it
Wow.
was the most confused I've ever been in my entire life.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I
Did you collect that? Did you keep it? What did you do with it? What were, if you may say, what were your conversations? What did your husband think about this? What was the reaction there at the time?
So, confusion, mostly.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of confusion. Because it was actually my husband who was there with me at the bus station watching those videos side by side with me.
Right.
And although we had, a copy being sent to us, he's the only other person that had seen that video other than myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, there was a lot of confusion. And I decided to go ahead and collect that coat along with a couple of other items of clothing to take to the police. They had their whole setup with multiple police cars, their canines, and I met them, at this certain location near his hiking spot and gave them the items, but I also told him, one of the investigators, I said, this is the coat he was wearing in the video that I watched of him getting on and off that bus on November. And they went through with the canines, but after that, as soon as that came to light, they completely stopped all investigation, did nothing else really after that.
It's important to remember this shirt, and I'm perfectly willing to believe you on it. This flannel shirt was there, but we've already gone through all of the stuff that is still missing.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. That stuff, usually it would seem that the flannel shirt would be with these other items. Those items were missing, but the shirt was not. And just once again, the shirt kind of just hanging there, not like on the floor of it where he lived or like hidden or anything. It was just hanging somewhere in his place.
It was, yeah. It was just up hanging in his closet with the rest of his shirts. It wasn't a shirt per se. It was a coat, kind of like, like a fluffy, kind of a puffiness on the inside, and just kind of a flannel fabric on the outside.
Okay, something that in your opinion, he would normally wear in November in Washington.
Oh, absolutely. I knew this coat specifically. He wore it all the time. This wasn't. Okay. It was a piece of clothing that I knew very well. Like I said, my dad was not a materialistic kind of person. He would wear things until they were literally falling apart. So I knew this flannel jacket. I mean, he wore it all the time, especially during this time of the year.
Okay. I have to ask you something. Did he have any other jacket that instead is missing?
Not that I could recall specifically, not jacket-wise, but there was a vest, which I do believe that he was wearing. He had multiple layers in this video.
Okay.
And he had a vest, and it was brown and orange that he wore all the time. Everybody knew his brown and orange vest that I do believe he was wearing in the video. I did not find that at his house.
But a vest is not going to keep you warm on your average Washington November day, right?
No, absolutely.
You're going to need something with sleeves and something like you're saying, like this flannel jacket that's puffy, maybe has insulation. And what you're saying is, I'm not hearing that something like that is missing.
Not that I could recognize.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so if he went out, somehow he went out with this jacket that he would normally wear in colder weather. All right, and of course, like we've already stated, he's seen wearing it on the video, but there's no proof that he ever made it back to his place that day, which is interesting. Okay. Somebody we've not discussed in a while is the roommate. What was his reaction to all of this? Was he helpful? We already know that he says he didn't see Clint. Last time he saw Clint was the day before the Monday, November 10th. So, what has he been helpful? Helping any searches? Property searched? What can you say?
No, he didn't do anything other than help us. We decided to go ahead and search the property at some point during that week, and he did help with that. But outside of that, he didn't go help the search and rescue. He wasn't in contact with me about what was going on. That was it. I stepped foot in his living space, his house, for the first time when I had the investigators. I had 2 investigators with me. I had my husband. I had a couple of family members, and we went into his house that day to kind of just talk with him and kind of come up with a plan. It was a cold day. We went inside. Come up with a plan about how we were going to search kind of the property. Outside of that, there was nothing. There was nothing. No support. No help.
Did he act concerned? Anything? Any? No help at all. Any concern? Man, I'm really worried about Clint. Anything that he expressed to you or to anybody that you know?
Not anything that jumps out to me as, there was not really anything.
Okay.
That he was just his normal self, as far as I can remember.
His story was that maybe saw him on November 11th, but now you said maybe the story changed. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? You'd mentioned that when we talked about him 45 minutes ago. But you'd said maybe his story changed. He said it was the 10th, but then maybe he thought it was the 11th. What was that again?
Then he did make a comment, after I think it was revealed that we had saw him on the video the morning of the 11th, getting on the bus. His story kind of was like, well, maybe it was the 11th, maybe it was the morning of the 11th and not the morning prior, and nothing was really consistent. He didn't work. He was always at home, Nothing was consistent with that aspect of his story.
Okay. Didn't help in any searches, nothing like that. Just total...
Yeah.
Seemingly just went on with his life as if your dad never went missing.
Yeah. I mean, I even remember when we finally, after everything and the investigation stopped, and he had basically called and said, hey, you need to get his stuff out of my basement.
Wow.
And I had I mean, me and my family had already went back home. We were just exhausted, and my aunt, which is my father's sister, she actually ended up flying out from Florida to help me go through his living space and figure out what we were going to donate and what we should keep, and and pack it all into the car. And the roommate never even bothered to help, asked if he could be helpful, nothing.
Wow. Okay. So the roommate, not much help, and in fact, could offer up any explanation as to why that flannel jacket was back in Clint's place when you last saw him wearing it on the video. Not even the roommate had no maybe answer for that, or maybe did he even know about it?
No answer. No, I mean there wasn't really a whole lot of emotion from the roommate. Just okay. Like I said, he didn't help in the search and rescue. He never even left his house. He only helped when myself and some family members and the investigator came to search the property.
Okay. What, as best as you can tell, what has this roommate done with his life over the past 10 years?
Since my dad's disappearance?
Yep. Any ideas, any problems with the law? Any violent charges against him? Any allegations? Anything like that?
Not to my recollection. I did try to reach out to him a couple of times afterwards. And the biggest reason is because my dad had a cat that he absolutely loved, and his roommate agreed to keep and take care of that cat. I wasn't able to take him in, unfortunately, but and no success. He never replied to any of my messages or returned my phone calls.
Okay. No ideas about any problems with the law, though? Anything that's come up?
Not to my awareness.
Okay.
I know he drank a lot, and he spent, as a matter of fact, I specifically remember going into his house. He had kind of this tower of empty beer cans on the table when the investigators and us all came into his home that day.
And that's something, though, that we should mention, though. The being that Clint lived in the same building, that property was searched.
Not his home.
Okay.
Not inside, was not searched.
I see.
Everywhere kind of around, we kind of searched the woods around, and the investigators did go through my dad's living space. Well, I wouldn't even say went in. They went in with me while I went through it. But no, his home in particular was not searched.
Okay. All right. So, but the rest of the property was?
Correct.
All right. And how big would you say approximately this piece of land is?
I would say at least an acre.
All right. So not too big.
Not too big.
All right.
Yeah, and it's all mountainside, so there was only so far we could go up and search.
All right. Okay. Let me just ask you some questions now, maybe some things that I think are probably going through listeners' heads. Was your father ever anybody ever said to your father, maybe start that again. Let me ask you a couple questions maybe that are going through listeners' heads. Is it possible that your father was out there hiking that day and somebody gave him a ride home instead of him riding the bus home. Have you ever heard of your father doing that, maybe asking for a ride home from the park, maybe if he missed the bus or something like that?
My father was a stubborn man.
Ah.
He no, he wouldn't have, and there's only one person in particular who he was sort of close with outside of the family, which was a previous coworker that I had gifted his car to, that I did reach out to, during that time to ask that specific question.
Yeah.
And no, he hadn't heard from my dad at all.
All right. So I guess it's always possible that your father could have gotten a ride from a stranger. I mean, there's no facts to dispute that. But you're thinking that if he missed the bus, is it more likely that you think he would have tried to walk home? Or not?
Given his stubbornness and his history of walking places, he probably would have done that before trying to burden someone with taking him home.
Okay. And how far is this? How far are we talking?
Miles. Many miles.
Many miles.
I believe the bus ride from the highway where he got onto the bus was about 30 minutes before he got off of the bus. So it would have been quite a hike.
Okay. All right, so we have that, and I also have to ask you: is it of your opinion, if his plan was to come see you and go to this event on that Tuesday, that he would have worn that jacket, the flannel jacket that you found in his place?
Most likely, considering he would have been walking from his car to the bus stop and then, possibly waiting for another bus. It was cold. It was November.
Okay.
He would definitely have been wearing a coat.
Okay. During these searches of this area where he got off the bus, has anybody ever come forward to say that anybody saw him there that day when he got off the bus? Obviously got off the bus. You saw it on that Tuesday, November 11th. Anybody ever come forward to say, oh yeah, I saw that guy walking through the park? Anybody ever come forward? Any witnesses?
No witnesses at all. We had even asked, some locals who had been fishing in that creek during the search, and nobody had seen him. The only person that even recognized his face was a bus driver at the station.
Right.
The main station. And that was it. But it wasn't that he'd seen him that day or anything.
Okay. So somehow that jacket made it back to his place, and we have no explanation for that. Except, and once again, I suppose we have to be open to the idea that you could have missed him on the video. I mean, we're all human and everything. I mean, I'm not here to guilt or blame anybody or anything, but for all intents and purposes, you're of the belief that that is the jacket he was wearing that day. So he made it back to his place one way or the other.
That is my belief. I mean, he had to there's only one coat that he had with a big old L-shaped tear in the back of it, and somehow that coat made it back into his house.
Okay. Let me ask you another question regarding his trip to go see you. Was this just going to be a day trip, or was he going to stay down there for a couple days and stay with you, or what was the, if he doesn't go missing, if he does show up that evening at 5:30, what were the plans after that?
The plan was for him to stay for the week, and I had kind of offered that, because I knew he wasn't working, and we had just moved back, and I, had a brand new grandson he had only seen once, and surely I wanted the help with 3 other little newborns. So the plan was for him to stay for the week, through the weekend.
Okay. So I have to ask you, if he would he have been taking then additional clothes with him to see you?
He probably would have brought an extra pair of clothes, not necessarily a full duffel bag full, but he definitely would have brought, the things he would need for an overnight.
For at least staying for like 4 days.
Right.
Okay. Any of the clothes missing? Did he have a duffel bag that you discovered that was missing, or could he have fit these clothes in his backpack? What is your belief?
He could have probably fit his stuff in his backpack.
He could have.
Took it.
He could have fit him. He could have. I mean, it sounds a little tight to me. I don't know how big this backpack was. I've never seen it, but that sounds like a duffel bag or some older over-the-shoulder bag would be a better fit for this circumstance, or not.
Not for him. No, he was more kind of 2 pair of clothes for a week. I have a washer and dryer. He would have been fine.
Okay.
He didn't ever carry any kind of duffel. I don't even think he owned one.
Okay. All right. So what you're saying is there could be clothes of his that are missing then with him, and they could be in this in this backpack that is also missing.
That is a possibility. Absolutely.
Okay. What's this been like for you, Tabitha? Of course, we're coming up here on 10 years. We're doing this, by the way, we're doing this interview on October 20th of 2024 for all the listeners. What have the last almost 10 years been like for you, Tabitha?
Well, it's been hard. I mean, I lost my brother just November 16th of 2013 or 2011, just 3 years prior. So having those dates close together were hard. I lost my stepfather in December of 2018. So as you can imagine, those couple of months are pretty rough for me and my family. I tracked on though. I know my dad, one big regret in his life was not finishing school and not going to college and getting an education. And one thing he drilled into me, was to go to school and get a degree. And I think the hardest day over the last 10 years was the day that I graduated from college and got my degree. And he wasn't there. That was really hard. But another part of me has accepted that I may go to my grave and never know what happened to my dad. And I've kind of come to terms with that. I have to. I've got a family to raise and a career, and he wouldn't want me to hold back on his behalf. So.
Yeah, your family needs you, for sure.
Absolutely.
And it's one thing that has come up with guests before, finding that balance between all the things that you have to take care for in your own life, and then you have a disappearance that if you don't do something about it, doing an interview like you're doing today or whatever, nobody else is going to do it, and trying to find that balance between the two.
Yeah, and it can be a hard balance.
Yeah.
And I have a very busy life.
Yeah.
Very busy life. But I don't ever forget that my dad's still missing and I still have no answers. And it's just something I have to come to terms with in order to be strong and take care of my family and keep living my life.
Tabitha, do you have a Facebook page, website, anything like that set up for your father's disappearance? If so, why don't you tell the listeners about it right now?
Okay, so yes, it's missing Clint Walker on Facebook. It does have some information there about his disappearance, pictures of him and his grandkids. I've shared some posts of other missing persons in the Washington area. Pictures of me and my dad growing up.
And you're the one that set it up, so if anybody sends you any messages, any tips or anything, you will get them yourself. You run the page, you are the administrator.
I am the administrator, and I do get the notifications, yes.
Okay. All right, very good. Tabitha, any final words before we complete this interview?
I appreciate the time, Ed. I appreciate you.
Very welcome.
Taking notice and taking the time to do this interview with me. It means a lot.
You're very welcome.
Very, very grateful for you and all that you do.
Thanks. I appreciate it. And I know you're still struggling with that DVD. If there's more technical help that I can give you, I will try to do so, because I think that's a very important part of this. I don't know what your plans are for that video, but if I maybe make the suggestion that, if you can get that up and running, it might be good to put that on the Facebook page.
Absolutely.
And please.
I do have kind of a frozen clip that is a part of the background profile picture of him stepping onto the bus that morning. There is additional video of him, going onto the bus, sitting down, checking his phone, that sort of thing, getting off of the bus. I wouldn't even be opposed to maybe sending you this DVD to see if you can finagle.
I'll give it a shot. I'm always a little nervous when people send me original materials, because you never know what can happen, not just here, but in the process of sending it, whether it's the mail or UPS or whatever. I'm not telling you not to do that, but certainly if you did that, I would give my best shot, certainly.
Yeah, I'm not tech savvy, and I have it up, and I have the clip player, and I have all the little boxes that should be showing the video, but I can't get it to play, and it's just giving me that it's never-ending circle thing, and it's been a frustrating process, but I really wouldn't be opposed to being the disc and sending you a copy of it to see if you could finagle it.
All right, if I could, I would surely make a copy and send it right back to you. I will give you my address. Everybody kind of knows my address anyway, but I will type you my address in our messenger chat. And if you want to do that, I promise you I will give it my best shot, for sure.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you, Ed.
You're very welcome, and I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that was my October 20th, 2024 interview with Tabitha, daughter of John Clinton Walker. I thank her for joining me and all of you on this episode. Even with 350 disappearances featured at this point, and with hats and shoes and purses and every other kind of worn possession playing a role in many of the cases we've covered, Clint's is the first one, at least in my memory, in which an item almost surely to have proven to be with the missing person the last time he was seen ends up back at the missing person's place of residence. This is especially bizarre, considering that Tabitha did not see her father get on the bus to go back to his home that day on any of the video. Okay then, What are the reasonable possibilities? How could this have happened? Well, I can list them, and these are in no particular order. Number one, I suppose we have to be open to the idea that Clint had more than one of the same color and style of jacket. Yes, I know there was the rip that seemingly made Clint's jacket in the video unique. However, it's also not uncommon for clothes of the same manufacturer, jeans or whatever, to have weaknesses, thus eventual rips, in the same places. Meaning the jacket found at Clint's is a twin to the one he was wearing. This would then mean he didn't come home that day. Number two, Clint came home then left, not wearing that jacket for some reason. Yet, this choice would mean a lot of things are inexplicable. How did Tabitha miss her father in the videos getting on the bus at the trail to come home? How did she miss him getting off the bus at home? And what about him getting back on the bus to go to the event? That is a lot of misses by Tabitha, and she doesn't seem like that type of person. Moreover, the jacket was Clint's favorite. Why wouldn't he wear it if we were going out into the cold weather? And really, this theory would not explain his disappearance. Not one bit. Number three, the roommate harmed Clint and somehow forgot to dispose of the jacket, while at the same time remembered to get rid of the backpack, the phone, and the other items still missing. Sure, possible, but we run into the same issues as number two. Did Tabitha really miss on the video Clint getting back on the bus to go home? Sure, I suppose Clint could have gotten a ride home from someone instead of using the bus. However, why would that driver not have revealed himself or herself at this point? And remember, Clint didn't have a cell phone that worked. How did he get this ride? He couldn't have called his roommate. And number four, this is the final choice that came to my mind while recording this episode. The video that bus management showed Tabitha was not from the disappearance date, that it was from some other day. Hey, mistakes get made, which is possible given how much Clint rode the bus to the hiking spot and back. One day could look like any other. This would open the door to the idea that yes, foul play happened between Clint and the roommate, with the roommate making it look like Clint left. And this was helped along unwittingly by the bus management making a mistake with the video, meaning Clint never left on November 11th, or maybe not even on the 10th. The counter argument, the video has to have a timestamp, right? I gotta be honest, even though I'm the guy who came up with those four choices, I don't like any of them, although I have to believe one of them is true. I think what I'm saying is more than a jacket is required to solve this disappearance. We need a very powerful thinking cap. If you'd like to hear and read more of my in-depth analysis into the disappearance of Clint Walker, go to patreon.com/unfoundpodcast. Sign up and partake in the Unfound blog. Until then, I leave the public theorizing up to you. And that's the program. Right now, while you are in your podcast platform, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, wherever, give Unfound a 5-star review, a thumbs up, whatever that platform allows. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've just finished this episode of Unfound.